I wasn't supposed to be there. That much was made clear the moment I stepped out of my car and looked up at the Hollins estate, my childhood home, now dressed in manicured lies and people who wore my father's last name like a badge of entitlement. They didn't send me an invitation, didn't even call, not a message, not a word. But I knew the reading of the will was happening today. I had the date circled in ink on the back of my father's final handwritten letter. He wrote it to me 2 weeks before he died, and it started with 3 words I was wrong. I wasn't always the black sheep. I used to be the first one he called in the morning, the daughter he bragged about when the business magazines printed my name next to patents I'd worked years for. I wasn't in the family business, but I had my own, and for a while, he respected that. Until Vanessa came back, until she walked into the room with her perfect pearls, her staged smiles, and Doug, the man who looked like he wore ambition like cologne. It didn't take long. Suddenly, my choices were no longer bold, but ungrateful. My independence no longer admirable, but disrespectful. And every dinner turned into a courtroom where I was the defendant, and my sister played judge, jury, and executioner. Dad didn't even notice the shift. Or maybe he did, but silence was easier. And when Judith, his second wife, added her subtle venom to the mix, I found myself slowly erased one birthday, one holiday, one boardroom vote at a time, until I became a ghost in my own family. So, no, I wasn't on the guest list, but ghosts have a way of showing up unannounced. I parked outside the estate, far from the valet's sight, and made my way through the garden path I used to sneak out of when I was 17. The windows glowed golden with light, the kind you can only afford with guilt money and generational wealth. Laughter spilled out from inside, like polished shoes tapped against marble floors. I could almost smell the bourbon and fake affection. I didn't plan to go inside. Not yet. I just wanted to see it, to feel what they had built on the ruins of my exile, to witness how easily I'd been replaced. But then I heard it. "Thank God she's not here," Vanessa said, her voice sharp, like always, but sugar-coated for the crowd. Dad would have been horrified to see her show up today. She made her choice. Doug chuckled, low and arrogant. Yeah, and he left her out of the will for a reason. Someone else joined in. Judith, I think she was always different. Too sensitive. Too proud. Let her stay gone. And just like that, my blood turned to ice. They spoke like I was dead, like I had never existed, like everything I'd given, every memory, every fight for our name was worth less than their polished smiles and whispered schemes. But you know what? I didn't flinch, I didn't cry. I simply turned around, walked back to my car, and pulled out the envelope. The letter my father wrote me, signed in ink, his seal intact. Inside it was a name, and a time, and one final sentence. "Come to the reading, Claire. I fixed it. 3 weeks ago, I got a call from a number I didn't recognize. Miss Hollins," the man said. "My name is Edward Klein. Your father appointed me to handle some confidential estate matters on his behalf. He asked that you meet with me privately. I thought it was a scam, but he knew too much. Too many details no one else should have had. So I went. And that's when everything changed." Edward was in his early 60s, but he had eyes like a hawk, calm, measured, sharp. He didn't speak like someone trying to manipulate me. He didn't speak much at all. He simply handed me a sealed document, notarized and time-stamped, and said, "This is your father's final amendment." He signed it the day before he entered the hospital. "It overrides the prior will." I read it. Then I read it again. I couldn't breathe. Not because I was shocked, but because a part of me long buried under disappointment and shame finally felt seen. He hadn't forgotten me. He hadn't chosen them over me. He had been watching. Quietly. Regretfully. And he made it right. So I stood outside the estate that night, letter in hand, and made a choice. I would show up, not to fight, not to argue, not to beg, but to stand in the space they tried to erase me from, and let the truth walk in ahead of me. It was 6:58 p.m. when the front doors opened. The lawyer, Edward, stepped out, eyes scanning the crowd like he was waiting for someone. Then his gaze found mine. He nodded. And just like that, I walked through the front gate, past the shocked gasps and frozen stares, straight into the reading room. Vanessa's face went white. Doug's glass shattered in his hand. Judith whispered something obscene under her breath, but I said nothing. I took a seat near the back, placed the letter on the mahogany table, and folded my hands in my lap. The lawyer cleared his throat. Ladies and gentlemen, we'll begin shortly. They thought I was gone, forgotten, erased, but they forgot one thing: I am still my father's daughter, and he remembered me. First, silence. That's all I heard the moment the lawyer said my name. The room, once bloated with smugness and staged affection, shrank in on itself. My sister's wineglass stopped midair. Doug, still gripping a broken stem from the glass he shattered earlier, looked like he'd bitten down on metal. Judith's eyes darted toward the hallway as if she were already calculating an exit. But me, I didn't move. I just sat there, breathing evenly, like I'd been here all along. Because in a way, I never really left this family. They just stopped seeing me. Edward, the lawyer, opened a thick leather folder with slow precision. Every motion was a scalpel. This, he said, is the most current, legally binding version of Mr. Hollins's last will and testament, revised and notarized exactly 21 days before his passing. The tension in the room thickened. I felt it pressing against my spine. Vanessa leaned forward, voice trembling but still venomous. Excuse me, that's impossible. The last will was finalized over a year ago. My father was in no state to... He was... Edward replied calmly, and it was his express wish that only this version be honored. He glanced around the room. Anyone who speaks now forfeits their right to challenge. That was also, in his words. And just like that, Vanessa's mouth snapped shut. I watched the dance of panic flicker across their faces. It was subtle, barely noticeable, but I knew them. I knew how Vanessa's eyes twitched when she lost control. I knew how Doug rubbed his jaw when he realized he bet on the wrong hand. I knew how Judith clenched her pearls like they were rosary beads whenever her performance cracked. And in that moment, I understood something powerful. They never feared losing the money. They feared losing the illusion that they were in charge. But let me back up. 3 weeks ago, when I sat down across from Edward in a quiet legal office on the edge of the city, I wasn't expecting redemption. I was expecting closure. What I got instead was a blueprint for return. My father's letter to Edward had been blunt, direct, unapologetically raw. She is the only one who never asked for anything from me. She is the only one who never lied to my face with a smile. She is the only one who let me fall so I could get up without shame. That's how he began. He went on to list every manipulation he'd finally recognized in his final year: the loan Doug forgot to repay, the sudden transfers of property to Judith's name, the business deals Vanessa rerouted through dummy companies. He hadn't been blind. He'd just been tired. And tired men sometimes pick the quiet over the truth. But in the end, he chose the truth. He wrote a new will, made Edward promise to deliver it only if I showed up in person. And then he signed it, with trembling hands, knowing it would undo every performance they had built around his decline. Now, back in the present, I sat there as Edward began to read, "To my daughter Claire, I leave the Hollins estate, in full, not because she asked, not because she fought for it, but because she didn't." Doug choked. Literally. Judith handed him a napkin, her own lips pressed tight to keep from screaming. To Claire. I also leave the controlling shares in Hollins Biomedical, because when I asked her years ago what she wanted, she said nothing. That kind of answer stays with a man. It was surgical. Line after line, my father dismantled their narrative. And I sat there in silence, letting each word rise and fall like a verdict they didn't see coming. At one point, Vanessa stood up. She manipulated him. She turned him against us. I was here. I took care of him. Edward didn't even look up. There's video documentation. Signed, witnessed, dated. He reached down and pressed a small button on the remote beside him. A screen lit up. And there he was, my father. Thin, pale, but still there, still him. "If you're watching this," he said. His voice cracked but steady. "Then I'm gone. And if Claire's in the room, thank you for showing up. I was a coward, Claire. You were right to walk away. And I hope, now, you'll walk back." My breath caught. The air felt heavier in my chest. He didn't look like the man who used to lecture me about loyalty. He looked like a man asking for forgiveness. And for the first time in years, I gave it to him silently. When the video ended, the room stayed quiet. The silence was no longer cold. It was ashamed. I finally stood, not to speak, not to gloat, just to be seen. Vanessa turned to me, desperate now. You can't possibly want any of this. You left. You walked away. I looked at her, right into the eyes of the sister who replaced me at every turn. I didn't leave. I said softly, You pushed me out. But he pulled me back in. With truth. Doug scoffed. So what now? You kick us all out. Take the company, the house, no. I said, I'm here to undo what you stole. When I left that night, I didn't say goodbye. Didn't look back. I drove to the city, parked outside the old cafe where I used to sketch my designs on napkins and pretend I didn't need family. And for once, I didn't. I had something better. Proof. Proof that I wasn't crazy. Proof that my silence had been strength. Proof that my father had seen me at the end, when it mattered most. They thought they'd won, that I was out of the picture, that the story had ended without me, but the ink was never dry. And in the last chapter, he wrote my name first. They were still smiling when I walked in, smiling like they'd already won, like I was just another footnote, a sad little guest from the past who showed up too late for the real show. I stepped into the room, a cathedral of wealth, drenched in mahogany, oil paintings, and the scent of a power vacuum waiting to be filled. Vanessa sat like a queen, legs crossed, her dress clinging to her like armor. Doug stood at the drink cart, pouring himself something dark and smug. Judith was perched near the fireplace, face soft with faux sympathy, perfect for the cameras she always imagined were watching. They didn't greet me. They didn't need to. Their silence was its own ceremony, an unspoken declaration that I didn't belong. But they were wrong, because I wasn't there to belong. I was there to be named. Edward, the lawyer, nodded when he saw me. No fanfare, no announcement. He simply opened the envelope, and everything changed. He cleared his throat, voice cutting through the room like a gavel. This is the official reading of the final will and testament of Mr. Lawrence Hollins, revised on the 14th of last month. This version was executed under full legal and medical supervision and overrides any prior statements, codicils, or trust documents. Vanessa shifted. Doug tightened his jaw. Judith's pearls clicked together just once. No one interrupted, not this time, because deep down, they could feel it. The center was about to shift, and the person they thought they erased was about to speak louder than ever. Edward continued, To my daughter Vanessa, I leave the lake house in Vermont. You always wanted it. Use it to find the peace you pretended to have. I felt the silence ripple across the room like a dropped wine glass. Vanessa didn't move, didn't blink, but her grip on the chair's arm tightened. To my son-in-law Douglas, I leave nothing. Your debts have cost this family more than money. Consider this a fair balance, Doug scoffed. A low, bitter sound that bounced off the room's vaulted ceiling and fell flat at his feet. To Judith, thank you for the years you gave me, but I've come to understand the difference between comfort and control. I hope you find something real. I hope it isn't money. Judith's lips twitched. Not quite a smile, not quite a sneer, just the slow unraveling of a mask that had been painted on too tightly for too long. Then Edward paused, looked up, and the air shifted. To my daughter Claire. The words fell like a stone into still water. Suddenly, every breath in the room belonged to me. To Claire, I leave the Hollins estate in its entirety. The house, the land, the holdings, the archive. I leave her my 61% stake in Hollins Biomedical, with full voting control. I leave her the journals in the study because she will understand them. And most of all, I leave her this truth: I see you now. And I should have seen you sooner. I didn't cry. I didn't smile. I just closed my eyes for one breath and let the sound of their unraveling fill the room. Vanessa stood up like she'd been slapped. What the hell is this? She snapped, voice cracking through the air. This isn't legal. Dad was confused. He was dying. He didn't know what he was doing. Edward didn't even flinch. I have a video of the signing. Witnesses, medical reports. Would you like to see them? Doug stepped forward, aggressive now. She was gone for years. She left him. We were here. We handled everything. I stood, calm, unshaken. You handled everything, I said. except telling him the truth. Vanessa turned to me like a knife seeking flesh. You didn't deserve this. You weren't even around. He didn't mean it. He was manipulated. No. I cut in, voice low but clean. He wasn't manipulated. He was finally awake. He saw what I saw, what you tried to hide, and he made his choice. This isn't revenge, Vanessa. It's restoration. Doug tried again. This isn't over. Yes, it is. I looked at him, then Judith. Because you didn't just try to take his money. You tried to bury his regrets. And you failed? Edward reached into his folder again. One more item, he said, sliding out a smaller envelope. Your father left this to be opened only if Claire attended in person. The weight of it was different. The seal was wax, the handwriting unmistakable. My name in his hand. I broke the seal and pulled out the letter. It was short. Claire, if you're reading this, it means you walked back into that room. And that means you've already won. You don't need my apology, but I needed to say it anyway. I believed lies because they were easier than facing the truth. And I forgot that strength doesn't always shout. Sometimes it leaves. I hope you'll come back home. Not for them, for you, because this place was always yours, Dad. I folded the letter and placed it back into the envelope. And for the first time in years, I felt still. Not vindicated, not victorious, just whole. Behind me, Judith stood and walked out of the room without a word. Doug followed, slamming the door behind him. Only Vanessa remained. Tears welling, hands trembling, rage swallowed by disbelief. How she whispered, "After everything, how did you win?" I walked past her slowly, then paused at the door, because I never played your game. I never needed to win. I just needed the truth to stop losing. The room was quiet when I left, the kind of quiet that doesn't come from peace, but from collapse. And I didn't look back, because he finally saw me, because he finally spoke my name, and because when the envelope opened, everything they built on silence came crashing down. They thought the paper would burn, that by shredding my father's regrets, hiding documents, and feeding him daily doses of curated lies, the past would never crawl back to the surface. But the thing about truth, you can bury it, you can pave over it with lawyers, lies, and fake smiles, but it never stays dead. It festers, it waits, and eventually it returns, with names, with receipts, with voice recordings, and this time, it had mine. After the reading, I didn't go back to the estate right away. I needed air, space, silence not poisoned by perfume and pretense. I sat in my car outside the lawyer's office for almost an hour, staring at the envelope again, the letter, the wax seal, his handwriting. I knew he meant every word, but what stayed with me was what he didn't say, because my father wasn't just haunted by guilt. He was afraid. And fear doesn't write letters like that unless there's more to uncover. So I opened the second envelope. Not the one Edward gave me, but the one tucked inside the old leather-bound journal my father used to keep in his study. The one he said I'd understand. Inside it was a flash drive. No label, no note. Just a 16-gigabyte key to the past. I went home, not the Hollins estate. Not yet. I mean the tiny 2-bedroom apartment above the bakery I'd rented for the past 4 years. The one with creaky floors and a broken heater, but with peace, with solitude, with truth in every corner. I plugged in the drive. It took 6 seconds to load. Then I saw them. Recordings, emails, signed documents, over 100 files, all dated, all time-stamped. My father had documented everything. The first video started with a conversation between him and Doug. You said this investment would be risk-free. Doug laughed. It is. As long as you don't ask too many questions. My father looked down at his glass. You used my name. Doug, I used our name. And I made us 10% back already. Then he leaned forward, too close to the camera. If Claire ever finds out, she'll crucify us. The screen went black. Another file was an audio recording, Judith's voice this time. She'll ruin everything if you let her back in. Claire is chaos. Lawrence, you know it. Just keep her out. She made her choice years ago. And my father, She's still my daughter. Then treat her like an enemy. Silence. A long, tired breath. Then my father's voice. Almost broken, I already did. There were spreadsheets, fake transfers, shell companies Doug used to siphon profits from Holland's biomedical into accounts overseas, then blame market volatility. Emails from Vanessa pressuring Dad to move estate funds into her name for efficiency. Even a letter she forged in his name denying my mother's old charity from receiving its endowment. It was all there. They hadn't just stolen my place, they hijacked his legacy. I stared at the screen for hours, hands shaking, breath shallow. Not because I was shocked, but because I finally had the weapon, and a reason to use it. The next day, I met Edward again. I handed him the drive. He didn't ask questions, just looked at me and said, "You're your father's daughter, after all." I nodded. "Only the better version." He smiled. "What do you want to do with all this not revenge?" I said. "Restoration." We filed for an internal audit of the estate. It wasn't hard. I was now the majority shareholder, sole heir, and by legal decree executor of the Hollands Trust. That meant I had authority to investigate past transfers, request financial documents, and, if needed, freeze access. Within 72 hours, Vanessa's personal credit line was suspended, Doug's consulting retainer from the company was terminated, Judith's housekeeper card was denied entry into the estate gate. They started calling, of course, Vanessa left voicemails, the usual blend of faux concern and veiled threats. "Claire, I think we should talk. This isn't what Dad would have wanted. Claire, I'm your sister. We're family. Claire, if you think you're going to ruin me, I swear to God." Click. Doug sent an email with one line. "You don't know who you're messing with." He was wrong. I knew exactly who I was messing with, and they had no idea what I'd become. Judith sent flowers, lilies, white, with a note. "No family survives total truth. Think carefully before you dig." So I did, and then I dug deeper. Turns out, the Vermont lake house Vanessa inherited. It was listed under a trust one created using my mother's name, funds stolen from her original foundation, Doug's accounts linked to a tax haven flagged for laundering. Judith. She had transferred one of my father's artworks to a private auction 5 days before his death, a painting valued at $4.2 million, and the kicker, she forged the shipping release. I gathered everything, packaged it, labeled it, backed it up 3 times. Then I sent a full dossier to the board of Holland's Biomedical, the family accountant, and Vanessa herself. No threats, no letters, just evidence, just truth. The kind that can't be denied, the kind that ends things. The final move, I walked into the estate for the first time since the will reading. No guards tried to stop me. I was now the legal owner. I walked through the front doors as if I never left, and went straight to my father's study. The walls were still lined with books. His desk was untouched. I unlocked the drawer beneath it and pulled out the original mission statement of the Hollands Foundation. My mother's handwriting, faded, but still strong. This family was built on invention, not inheritance, on honesty, not appearances. I framed it, and that night I posted it in the entryway of the estate, so that everyone who entered would know the old empire was gone, a new one was rising, one they couldn't fake their way into. They thought they buried the truth. They thought they had time. But I came with every receipt, every signature, every whisper they thought would stay hidden. I didn't scream. I didn't beg. I didn't even knock. I simply walked in through the front door, with their secrets in my hand. There's a moment after the dust settles where the silence changes. It's not peace. Not yet. It's the sound of people realizing they've lost something they'll never get back. And I had a front row seat to it. Judith left first. She didn't make a scene. No parting speeches. No threats. She simply vanished, bags packed in silence. Her exit punctuated by a discreet car waiting at the back gate. The same way she entered this family, polished, silent, calculating. A few weeks later, her name disappeared from the estate registry. A quiet erase for someone who had spent years trying to erase me. I didn't stop her, because I didn't need to. She knew the war was over. And I wasn't interested in survivors, only truth. Doug came next. He fought harder. Lawyers, PR calls, counterclaims, all noise, no ground. He tried to delay the audit, challenge the control shift, even accuse me of emotional coercion. but the documents spoke louder. So did the federal inquiry into his offshore accounts. One by one, every board seat he thought he secured slipped from under him. And when the news broke, when the words fraudulent dealings and corporate misconduct hit the headlines, it wasn't me who leaked them. It was the company, because legacy businesses don't fall with fire. They freeze you out. They erase you like a stain. He became exactly what he made me once non-essential. Then there was Vanessa. She didn't leave. She lingered, clung to every corner of the estate like a childhood memory begging not to be cleaned out. I found her in the sunroom one morning, sipping the same tea our mother used to drink. She didn't look at me, didn't speak. She just sat there, perfect posture, broken silence. After a long pause, she whispered, "I thought he hated you." I didn't blink. He didn't. He feared what I reminded him of, which was that love isn't something you inherit. You earn it, and you protect it, even when it's inconvenient. She looked at me then, and for the first time in decades, I saw it not anger, not arrogance, loss. Because she didn't just lose a house or a name, she lost the script she wrote herself into. And now, the credits were rolling, without her name. I didn't kick her out. I didn't need to. I simply redefined the house. The Hollins estate was never meant to be a trophy. It was built by vision, by invention, by a woman, my mother, who believed in science and sanctuary in equal measure. She was erased too soon, rewritten as a footnote in my father's second life. But I remembered, and I brought her back. The East Wing, once Judith's personal gallery, was cleared out. I turned it into a foundation space, a startup incubator for young women in biotech and biomedical research, the name the Margaret Hollins Institute. Every plaque, every program, every grant carried her name forward. My mother built this family's real legacy. Now, the world would see it. The company followed. I didn't take revenge on the board. Didn't fire people for the sake of theater. I cleaned house where it mattered, legally, quietly, decisively. And when the press asked me for comment on the Hollins restoration, I gave them only one quote. This wasn't a takeover. This was a return. I didn't burn the house down. I turned the lights back on. My father's study remains untouched. I keep his chair exactly where he left it, not because I need a shrine, but because I need a reminder that even flawed men can choose clarity. In the end. And what about me? I don't live at the estate. Not really. I still keep my apartment above the bakery, still take walks without bodyguards, still make my own tea, exactly how I like it, too strong. No sugar. Because the truth is, I never needed all this. The name, the money, the empire. What I needed was acknowledgement that I existed, that I mattered, that I wasn't crazy for remembering things differently than they told me to. And now, I have something better than their apology. I have the proof. I walk the halls now, not as a daughter begging to belong, but as a woman who owns every brick, every broken silence, every damn file. The estate still breathes, but the air has changed. The curtains are open. The rooms are full of people who speak truth without asking for permission. And sometimes, when I pass the old guest room, I hear echoes of my own voice years ago, younger, uncertain, asking to be seen. If she could see me now, she'd know I didn't scream, I didn't shatter glass, I didn't need to, because the lawyer read my name first, because the will didn't save me. It confirmed what I always knew: I was never out. I was simply waiting for the silence to end. And when it did, I spoke last. But I was the only one still standing.